Okay, we maybe are live. Maybe Jared and I can say how we really feel about all of you, if you're here or not. But I think we're here. I think we're live. I think we're doing it. Let's check. Are people in the chat confirming that we're live? Always got to know, because I always mess it up, guys. You know, and I know I always mess it up. What's up, guys? It's Michael Burns. I'm here today with a very special guest. I mean, special guest seems like not enough to say here, but I'm with Jared Bauer. Now, you guys probably know Jared for a number of reasons. One is that Jared has a very good YouTube channel that exists on the internet right now and goes on Twitch. Does some of the best sort of media analysis, in particular of movies, that anyone does on the internet. One of the godfathers of sort of YouTube film analysis. Also, one of the founders of a place that you might have heard of, a channel that is called WISECRAck. And here's a heads up, guys. We're going to talk about some WISECRAck stuff today, but if you hear hesitation in my voice at any point, know that legal stuff, and I'll say more in due time, but I'll say that now to get outside. You're fine.
I'm hoping that I was wishing, maybe you should have went over what I can't say, because we didn't talk about that at all before stream.
You can say anything. I just maybe will hesitate to answer some things, or I'll do the very me thing where I pause and I say language very carefully. I just want to give a special shout out to Alec Opperman in the chat. Alec Opperman being a big part of things that we're talking about. And Alex in the chat's getting married today. What are you doing watching this? Although I guess on the day one gets married, you have time to do other stuff. But we're here to chat, for a number of reasons. Some of which being I just want an excuse to catch up more with Jared and pick his brain and hear what he's thinking about. Others being that it kind of seems like an appropriate time to talk. Jared was, as the founder of WISECRAck and the OG voice and face of the channel, had some time and removed from the whole thing. I have now been removed from the whole thing. So, an interesting opportunity to talk about the meaning of that channel and our work there and our overlap there from a slightly more objective viewpoint. And I'll say as well, before we really get cooking, Jared knows everything I'm about to say, because he knows he's a character in the stuff I'm about to say. But Jared, important person in my life, because Jared's one of the people who invited me to start contributing to WISECRAck originally, which led to me getting to work there part-time and then full-time, and then, sort of figure out that I like doing stuff on YouTube. So if it wasn't for Jared inviting me to do stuff on WISECRAck, I wouldn't be doing anything on the internet, which for a certain percentage of people means they're happy that Jared did that. And for another percentage of people, they want to get 2 time machine trips, one to kill baby Hitler and one to make sure that Jared never put me on YouTube.
Oh, Jesus.
And so I want to start with something. I'm going to say, let's see, should I go a little spicy and then back up, or go?
Well, the algorithm loves if you put spicy at the beginning, so go for it.
Well, let's go spicy here. Jared, one of the I wouldn't say one of the worst parts of my life, but one of the most annoying parts of my professional life, on and off for the past 5 years, definitely for the first few years after you left WISECRAck, was every day of my life being asked, A, where's Jared? And B, being told why I was not as good as Jared. And I feel like sometimes there was this assumption in my annoyance at those comments that I was somehow like tacitly annoyed at you, which is obviously not the case at all. But it was such a weird part, and something that I feel like there's not a lot of. I'm going to give a really hyperbolic example here. One of the only examples I can think of is something where like people love a band a lot, and a member of the band, or like the lead singer, leaves and a new person fills in, and for a chunk of the audience, they're like, fuck Sammy Hagar. David Lee Roth is the only singer of Van Halen, or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
And it was very, I'm just going to say that to be spicy, and clear. That's not saying anything bad that you did, but it was an interesting part of the transition and my beginning of hosting the channel.
Well, I was actually going to come up with a spicier example. My example was the Woody Allen. Okay, so you ask anybody who's Woody Allen's wife, and they'll tell you that it's his adopted daughter. That's
Yes.
just the narrative that was accepted, because, you know, like the real truth was that, like, you know, he was dating Mia Farrow. Mia Farrow was had been married to Andre Previn, and they had
Uh-huh.
an adopted daughter that had no legal binding to Woody Allen. But, you know, the more sensationalized version, everybody wants, you know, the spiciest thing. And, you know, obviously if somebody disappears from a channel and then somebody else fills in, um, you know, people just want to believe the most dramatic narrative.
Yeah, they do. It's very funny too, because, like, you know, I think, and
Oh
one thing that
no.
always surprised me is Jared, and again, we'll back up, and I want to ask Jared about some early wisecrack stuff. But, you know, when
I lost you for a second. My internet's been kind of spotty all day. I'm sorry. Can you just back it up just 1 second?
yeah, this is why American internet is the best, and these democratic socialist nations with their commie
It's
internet are not
usually
getting the
very
job done.
good.
But, you know, because it's an interesting sort of thing about how people project the narratives they want to be true onto, especially internet stuff. Because, you know, Jared, when you stepped away from Wisecrack and moved and all these sorts of stuff, you know, you did talk about it. Like, you did a stream about it, made a video about it. So you, I felt like, did a good job of, like, letting people know, here's what's gone on with me. Here's why I've decided to step away. And it would be interesting sometimes where, like, I would literally send people the link to your videos about this stuff to be just like, bud, it's great if you love Jared. It's great if that's your guy, but he himself has talked about this. And another thing I would often do is just, and again, I try to do this out of a sense of kindness and not wanting to be a dick to people, would, like, send them links to recent videos you were making that were really good, many of which have, like, hundreds of thousands of views, to also be like, I get it. If you don't like me, that's totally fine. But if you really miss Jared, he's actively making stuff right now, and you should maybe go support what he's doing and not continue to tell me why you wish I had red hair.
You know what, the mistake you're making, Michael, is that you're reading the comments. And by the way, like, it's a
This
good
is
thing
a
to
smart
do.
thing you never did.
I did sometimes, but I always regretted it. And the conclusion I've come to is that most internet content these days is watched on phones.
Yes.
And phones, the medium is the message, and a phone is an adult pacifier. And, you
Yes.
know, when people put their phone, they just looking for a dopamine hit. And for some people, they get that dopamine by being a dick. And
Yeah.
so you just kind of can't take it too seriously. I mean, the way I say it is, like, you know, people got a lot of shit going on. People's lives are very stressful. If someone is talking shit about you on the internet, they're probably using it as a coping mechanism to go through something. Maybe, not to say, I'm not trying to, like, cast doubt on the sincerity of what people say. I'm sure some
Yeah.
people are also saying things that are true, but at the end of the day, you know, you have to kind of understand the context of, like, and the utility of some of these messages.
Yeah. And just as people sort of file in, I see more people showing up. What's up, guys? It's me, Michael Burns. I'm here with Jared Bauer. We're talking. This is basically, you know, the Hassan Piker Ethan Klein debate for guys that aren't mad at each other and have not slandered each other.
Oh man, listen to you. You love the internet. See, I just stay away from all that shit.
You
I just can't. Yeah.
well, and okay, now I'm going to say a very present thing. I'm going to use this as a way to back up, but I feel like that is, in a sense, the best and worst aspect of the aggressively hard shift towards parasociality on YouTube in particular. I'll say
Totally.
I'll say something positive first, which is that, like, because of the aggressive parasociality of all of it, like, there is a chance for community building. And I've experienced very positive things with folks from the YouTube community and folks on Patreon and social media. And of course, you know, there's people at this point, I have, like, people I'm legitimately friends with who I have run into in life who are like, oh shit,
Very cool.
I watch, like, YouTube stuff. And I really think that is good. Um,
I mean, just to build off that. So
no,
first of all, I probably would have not come back to making content on the internet
yeah,
if it weren't for people reaching out, especially when I was in a dark time, and,
yeah,
you know, like, expressing their gratitude for what I had done. And so I really appreciated some of the fans for that. But also, yeah, when I actually moved to Finland, one of my only friends that I had was just some dude who used to listen to our South Park podcast
Hell
who,
yeah.
and I was like, okay, awesome. There's some kind of foundation here. Let's be friends because I don't know anyone here. And we're still really good friends. So yeah, I totally feel that.
Yeah. And then I guess I would say, now that I said the positive thing, the dark side of all of that is that there's really like toxic parasociality, because we had a thing maybe like a year ago at Wisecrack, my former employer. A series of bad decisions led to this, which was I had watched on stream a video that was like Jordan Peterson talking to the streamer known as Destiny. Now, in watching this, for me, it was just like, these are just like internet guys talking. Some of what they're saying is hilarious. Some of it is really dumb. Some of it creates the occasion to talk about real ideas. But like the Destiny's audience is really aggro, and someone like posted on Reddit like Wisecrack guy is talking about you, and next thing you know, the chat's getting filled up, and then Destiny is mad, and I don't want to jump on his stream, but then our friend Michael Luxembourg is like, I'll jump on his stream. So
Oh,
then
boy.
he does. And the next thing you know, he's getting turned into like memes on this community. I'm having to shut down my social media accounts because I'm getting flooded with people being like, using slurs to tell me they hope I'm dead. And it was my first experience of realizing there's like a version of contemporary parasociality. And I think one that especially affects younger dudes that's on a whole other level in terms of intensity and toxicity. And I'm old enough to have not come up with that, such that I'm still sometimes shocked by how intense it is. In the same way that, like, I jokingly referenced the Hassan Piker, like Ethan Klein debate, but like one of the biggest things that's happened on YouTube and Twitch is just like two dudes that don't like each other and their audiences then don't like them. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wait, so you're telling me there's a clip of Destiny debating Lux on the internet?
There is. It is. And the best part about it, and this is like a deep cut for all the real Wisecrack heads here, Lux is doing the typical Lux thing of speaking into a laptop as he walks around his house,
Smoking a cigarette.
Yes.
Of course, of course.
Oh, not smoking a cigarette, smoking all of the cigarettes. So, but okay, but so all that said, I want to go back then, because I think a lot of what we're describing now is, relatively recent, if we're going to say relative to the emergence of, modern YouTube culture and streaming culture. I want to talk a little bit. I think folks will be interested in this, even though it's a story that's been told. Talk about the beginning of Wisecrack and how you got into the thing and what your vision was early on. I know that, it was, and to give credit where credit's due, it wasn't just you. It was you and Jacob Solomon. I know some other people early on. But when you first, and I'll speak for you in as much as I know that like you're someone who's always been interested in film, you studied film, the people you started the channel with were like that. So how did you first get into things, and especially what first led you into like the video essay space with Wisecrack?
It's a long question. So I moved to Los Angeles in 2010, finished up film school there, and movies were always my passion.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, it was all about movies. I think that maybe you'll agree that one of the things that you learn very quickly when you move to Los Angeles and start understanding the industry is that there's like huge class barriers to making a living, just a living. I would have been happy with pretty much any job that I could get, just making a living, making movies, or being close to that thing I love. I don't know if I feel that way these days, but anyway, at the time, that was the reality. And then, Jacob and I decided that we would try to like make movies together. That was our dream. Very quickly, we kind of realized, first of all, that like making a movie is a crazy thing to do. It's a huge swing. It's a expensive swing. We know people we met people that had been making movies for like 10 years. And then the movie gets made after a decade of asking for money, finally finding the money, which is a years-long process in itself, and then producing it. And then it comes out and either it sucks or it flops. And then you're just fucked. When I say there's class barriers, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, you have to be in a pretty cush position in your life to be able to take a risk like that and just kind of waste 10 years on something that doesn't give you any money.
Yeah.
So we quickly realized, like, okay, this is not something we can do. At this time, YouTube was a very different place than it was today, because there was this YouTube had decided to take a handful of channels and make $1 million investments. We were not one of them, but this is just something that happened. So, for example, like what's that? The Green Brothers have that education channel.
Yeah,
That was one of them.
is it the Complexly one or?
No. Someone in the chat probably knows.
Yeah, I know, but we know what you're talking about, the Green Brothers thing.
And then there was Nerdist. There was, I think, even ESPN was one of them. There were all these brands that got, because basically YouTube was thinking that, all right, this is no longer going to just be cat videos, that this is going to start becoming premium content. And so because of that, this also became an interesting site for investment. Because people started to think that, like a subscription actually meant something, right?
Yeah.
And that if you get a subscriber, that means that you have a fan for life, and then you can guarantee that they will see all the content that you upload and stuff like that. So some of these companies took on investment, and I was kind of studying the space, and just something that I had always loved doing. Actually, when Jacob and I were working together at a software company, for fun, I would write for this website that I don't know if it exists anymore. It was called overthinkingit.com. And there were like these comedy sketches, or not sketches. There were these like comedy essays where people were just overthinking things. I guess it was like kind of a very early film theory. Yeah. I took it a little bit too serious, but like I wrote some essays about like The Dark Knight and like There Will Be Blood or something like that. But it wasn't until many years later that we actually ended up starting doing video essays. But at that time, it was also a time when videos were very much about shareability. Like these days, it's all about the algorithm. But back then, if you were planning on making a splash on YouTube, you had to create something that was shareable, something that would make it to the top page of Reddit, et cetera, et cetera. I'm trying to not tell like the whole fucking legend here. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to curse.
You're allowed. We're allowed. You know how YouTube works. We're allowed to curse. No, if you get too in the weeds, I'll cut you off. I don't care.
Yeah.
I think you're fine.
So Jacob and I started with this like comedy series called Bubble Please, which was kind of like a mix of SNL's Coffee Talk with Chappelle's Show, and that was like a very Jewish comedy series. We were able to like do a Kickstarter for like $6,000 or something to make 10 episodes, and then from that, basically our first show, Thug Notes, was like a spinoff of that. But very quickly, it kind of became, we're kind of approaching this in order for the idea to really work. We have to approach it from the perspective of actually being really robust and really reverent towards literature and actually be very serious about education. So then the idea became, okay, maybe there's a brand here about what we called at the time edgy education. Just like education that was like, can you mix Sesame Street and Chappelle's Show? What would that look like?
I love that specific example.
Yeah. And so actually for like 4 months, the original name for Wisecrack that we wanted was Smartass. I don't know if you ever heard that.
Oh, I did know that. Yeah.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I guess that trademark was taken or something like that. So, I mean, it took a long time to come up with the name Wisecrack. I don't really know why, because it's just like a dictionary word. And yet we were looking through the dictionary for a bunch of stuff. And then the video essay really didn't come out until like we had actually tried a bunch of shows. And shows, I think when you say that the internet is now in a place of like hardcore parasociality, that's what's lost, is that there's very few successful shows. I mean, they exist. And I mean, some of them are wildly successful, but for the most part, it's just, I think last time we spoke, you said it well, it's just people talking about things. So, we had Thug Notes, we then had 8-Bit Philosophy, then we had Earthling Cinema, and then we had like a couple of other shows that were short-lived. One of them was called Pop Psych. And then I remember Ryan Haley, who this guy loved to death. He was on the Rooster Teeth Funhouse crew for a while. And
shout out to Ryan. I know a lot of people in the chat probably love and follow Ryan.
Yeah. And I remember I was in his garage because Ryan, if you don't know, Ryan, for the first like 10 years he lived in LA, was either living in somebody's closet, literally closet, or someone's garage. And so at this point in his life, he was living in someone's garage, and he was editing the first episode of Earthling Cinema.
Oh, amazing.
And I'll never forget, like, he was showing me the cut. I didn't really know what to expect, but there was a moment where I think we were talking, the line that Garrick Swarmreloid said was something along the lines of like, the movie is about free market capitalism or something like that. And Ryan showed the shot in the movie where there's a close-up, Edward Norton's on a plane, and there's a close-up of the like single serving food. And it was that juxtaposition where like something visual can convey an intellectual idea, and that juxtaposition kind of creates an interesting meaning. It's like, okay, there's something interesting here, and that was like a huge eureka moment for me. Now, I'm not going to take credit for creating the video essay because I definitely didn't. It definitely started with Red Letter Media, as in terms of like the popularizing of it. Like when they did you ever see those, like when it first hit big, like those hour-and-a-half long reviews of the Star
I've seen
Wars
some of those, yeah.
prequels? Like the one, like the Phantom Menace one was like an early, I think in like 2010, it was like a mega viral video where I can't remember the name of the character he plays, but like that was like the first video essay that I saw, at least. And I'm sure like these things existed probably in academia and stuff, but in terms of on YouTube, that's something that had a significant audience. That was from the first one. And then I think there was Tony from Every Frame of Painting.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of like also predated us. But I think the like doing the academic angle was something that had never really been done before. And we decided to try it out first with, I think it was Grand Theft Auto 5. It was like the satire of Grand Theft Auto 5. But it all kind of, the idea really came from Ryan's basement. I mean, the idea didn't come from him, but just him showing me what he was doing with Earthling Cinema really sparked the idea. But yeah, I mean, so that's kind of the genesis of it.
Well, it's interesting too to think about how, you know, what you're describing earlier YouTube, and even when I first, you know, I'll jump ahead and we'll go backwards again, got involved with Wisecrack and started really paying attention to YouTube. There was a thing you saw with a lot of channels, which it was like YouTube trying to be TV. And then it seems like with the video essay thing, we've seen something that's the opposite now, where you have like TV that tries to be YouTube. Like, because if you watch, you know, John Oliver, right? The format of an episode of John Oliver, when you extract the high production value bits and Will Ferrell coming to do a musical number or whatever it is, the version of the show they post on YouTube is like a YouTube video. It is a video essay about a topic where you know, to be very blunt about the video essay format, where a white guy sits at a desk and reads things and shows some clips and reads some more stuff. You know, when Hassan Minhaj had a show on Netflix, it was essentially like a video essay format exploring different things. So it's interesting that like we've seen it go from being YouTube on TV, or YouTube trying to replicate TV doesn't work. TV started replicating YouTube. And now in the trades, at least, there's the sense in which TV now wants a piece of what YouTube became organically, which is very interesting. I think there's some problems there. We can maybe talk about that.
I remember when I saw The Big Short in theaters, I was like, okay, YouTube has entered the cinemas. Yeah.
Yeah. Shouts to Adam McKay, friend of what was Wisecrack. This I should say this more off camera, but I'll say this now, Jared. When things like I'd been working on something with Adam McKay and his crew for a while that might not happen now because of what happened, but you know,
you maybe briefly mentioned something like that. There was actually a time where it's someone in that crew, but when Wisecrack was in the process of being, or was about to be sold, one of the potential buyers was a company that one of like Will Ferrell's crew.
Yeah. I believe that,
but I don't think it was the one that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, how about? Oh, let me see something. Okay, so you guys start doing video essays, and so something people might know or might not know is that in the early days of the more video essay Wisecrack stuff, so not talking about Thug Notes, which you all obviously had a ton of success with, and Earthling Cinema and 8-Bit, but when the video essay thing started initially, you were disembodied voice.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was, and correct me if I'm wrong here, in the early days of the video essay, was that the common thing for the hosting to mostly be VO?
I guess for Every Frame of Painting, that is the case. Tony never showed us it, but we weren't really looking at that as a comp. I mean, I really honestly, you know, maybe you feel something like this, but I felt a little bit, at least initially, hesitant to take the spotlight because it wasn't about me. It was a team, you know? And
I have thoughts
that
on
was
that
really
bookmark, but
yeah, I mean that's kind of what it was more than anything, is that I never really considered myself to be talent. I considered myself to be a showrunner, and that's kind of what I wanted to build with Wisecrack, was shows in which, you know, we had Greg who
Mhm.
played Sparky Sweet's PhD, who's an amazing performer. And we had Mark Schroeder, who was just killing it. He was like
Mhm.
at that time, like his team was winning every UCB
Yeah,
competition. And it was just,
hilarious guy.
that's definitely one of like the highlights of my time in Los Angeles, was like, doing shoots of Earthling Cinema and then going to see Mark that night, just kill it at UCB. And then the guy who wrote most of the Earthling Cinema scripts, Ben Steiner, that dude is freaking killing it. Like he wrote on Mythic Quest, is it?
Yeah.
Never Have I Ever. I mean, the dude's just killing it in the writers' rooms. The reason that we lost him on Earthling Cinema is because Mindy Kaling, I think, was a fan of the show and was just like, "Oh, I'm taking that guy," and obviously we can't compete with her.
God damn you, Mindy Kaling.
God damn you, Mindy
This
Kaling.
is an anti-Mindy. I'm kidding. Yeah. Well, so but then the crucial thing though is, of course, at a certain point, you went from being disembodied voice to, redheaded heartthrob. So what led to the initial shift when you started going on camera? Because I'm trying to remember. I feel like when you would know this better than I did. I know that the first thing I ever wrote at Wisecrack was in early 2017. I feel like at that point, was it still VO or were you on camera then?
Do you remember what the subject was?
Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I was not on camera then.
Yes. Okay, that's what I
That
remember.
was actually pretty early in the video essay thing.
Yeah. So because I do remember, I remember when you went on camera and how it shifted stuff. But what led internally to you all deciding to put that
Yeah,
out there?
so two things. One, we had befriended Matt Pat, and at
Uh-huh.
the time, Matt Pat was doing like this consulting gig where, like he was so stupendously successful, and he had this side gig where he was consulting other channels on how to grow. And one of the
Mhm.
things that he said was that, he kind of saw it. I think it was already kind of obvious, but we just didn't want to believe it. But he said, like, you just have to have a cult of personality. You just have to have an individual. You have to have a person there.
Yeah.
And, at the time, the person was Greg, because, kind of Greg was the star. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how I wanted to keep it. But, Greg is a stand-up comedian. Like, he just didn't really have interest in, his interest is in comedy. And that's where he really,
Yeah.
really shined. So it was just me and Jacob looking at each other and just like, all right, well, one of us has got to do it. But then the other reason, and this is like a super mundane thing, but it made production easier when you can cut to a talking head, because
Mm-hmm.
it's so much like motion graphics and stuff when you're saying something that probably doesn't actually have to be visualized,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to philosophy. One of the things, just a super uphill battle the whole time, was, we would talk to all these really successful science channels, and we'd ask them, like, why do you think there are a lot of successful science channels and not a lot of successful philosophy channels? And their answer is very simple: because science is more visual,
Mm-hmm.
and it's YouTube. It's a visual medium. I think it's less of a visual medium today because, again, I think a lot of people just like everything is kind of a podcast. Sometimes it's not the case, but again, I think most content is still consumed on the phone. But yeah, I mean, it was just, all right, well, it's really hard to visualize the concept of, platonic forms. It's maybe even impossible to visualize them. So why not we just have a talking head instead?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is a side question, something I should have asked earlier. And you kind of got at this, but what also led then to the decision? Because again, like early-ish, some of the early content that you and Jake were making, some of the early Wisecrack stuff, isn't necessarily aggressively philosophical or overtly. So it's thinky in a variety of ways. But what then led to when you started leaning into the video essay format, when you started hosting everything? What led to the more overt pivot to, quite literally such that like a lot of the earliest, most popular Wisecrack videos were philosophy of blank. So what kind of got you there?
I'm trying to think exactly where it came. I'm sorry, you cut off a little bit because of my nerd.
Oh,
Did you
sorry.
say like why the pivot to philosophy
Yeah.
explicitly? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I've never taken a philosophy class in my life. It's always been something I've been very interested in, and I
Mhm.
always just thought that I had a temperament for it. And I think when you're doing
You do?
something like this, and you're you have to lean into something that you're passionate about. You really have to. And during the Wisecrack time, there are some hidden channels of the internet of us trying stuff just to see
Mhm.
if we could like get that algorithm to feed us something. See if we could have this cash cow in the background. And it never worked. And at least I feel there are some people out there that have like these extremely successful clips channels that they do agnostic of like, whatever this is not like a accusation of being a grifter. This is just saying that some
Mhm.
people are able to just grind, put out stuff that works, and
Yeah.
just kind of remove their own taste from it. And unfortunately, or for, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I was just never one of those people.
Mhm.
Um, and I also believe that Wisecrack had the success that it had because it was surrounded by people it was staffed by people who were passionate about what they did. And I think that especially with YouTube, a platform that's all about parasociality, people can smell the inauthenticity,
Yeah, and I do think that's a testament to, this is something. This is where I get into the territory where I'm going to be careful about what I say. But a reason why in recent months those of us involved with Wisecrack, and up until the layoffs happened, 3/4 of our team are people who were working on the channel with obviously myself,
Yeah.
Amanda, and Lux, and then shout out to producer Olivia, one of the best in the game. We love her. But I think we felt a pressure to want to figure out whatever we could do to honor the channel and the legacy, because it's like you guys built something where so many amazing people have been involved in it over the years. I saw Sarah Kaplan in the chat earlier. Obviously, Alec Opperman's here. There's so many great people. I'm tempted to start naming, but then I don't want to forget anyone. But you did something in a space and in a town where there's a lot of like assholes and strivers, where I do think there's something about the culture that you all established meant that even as the channel was a part of certain communities or corporate entities where there were assholes and strivers, that it didn't infect the thing. I do wonder if that has to do with the content itself, and that like when you make things that have a level of intellectual integrity to them and that are not just chasing clicks in a certain way. Obviously, one has to chase clicks up into a point to pay the bills, but that sort of sets a good culture there. But listen, now I'm just blowing smoke up Jared's ass.
Well,
So.
no, I appreciate that. And like, again, more to what I said before, like I love the team so much. And, so much of the struggle about when I left was knowing that, the team was larger than it was
Mhm.
back then. And I saw layoffs kind of coming around the corner, and, it wasn't, I mean, I was going through other stuff, but I couldn't have
Yeah.
gone through that. That would have been, I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
Um,
No, and I think that's the thing too. And this will get a little. I'll speak to my experience and the experience of some people who I feel like would be comfortable with me saying this, and we can back up again. But there's like a thing that we have. Everyone who's worked at Wisecrack has talked about the sort of like Wisecrack curse or Wisecrack burnout, because
really?
in
So it's a thing now.
yeah, I mean honestly, Jared, since basically since you left, every single person with maybe some exceptions, who was kind of put in the driver's seat eventually got the hell out of there. And
Yeah.
people who, I saw him in the chat. I'm comfortable saying this. I don't think he'd get mad at me. If you would get mad at me, fly to California and fight me, you Brooklyn coward. But Alec Opperman, who was the man in charge after you left, and someone who I think has had, I think in terms of someone who was never like the face of the thing, Alec had such a huge hand in shaping
Oh,
the
so
channel and the
by the
content.
end,
And
another thing that was killing me at the end is I relied on Alec so much because I was so burnt out. I relied on him too much. I mean, he was there,
he's
and he
great.
just lifted the entire burden on his shoulder. But that was a huge thing of guilt for me, is because not only was I burnt out, but I just felt like I was, yeah.
Yeah, but and like a good friend of the show and the world, Evan Yee, one of the best producers, directors, cinematographers, one of those talented guys I know in this town. He had to get the hell out at a certain point, and I know some of us uh, who were there when the layoffs happened all had moments, and like it's something I had been thinking about on and off for like a year, just because of how stressful it can be. So there's uh it's almost one of those things where like doing something you believe in, doing it for the right reasons, doing it with integrity, doing it with a great team, it creates the problem of it almost makes it harder.
Well, let me ask,
It's
what do
yeah.
you what? Well, I
Go ahead.
guess you just answered the question, but what
Yeah.
do you think it? Well, first of all, do you think it's actually unique to Wisecrack? Because,
Hmm,
for
not
example, like
fully.
I don't know if you were there, but there was a time, this is like right before I left, there was so another extremely successful channel, Donut Media, sometimes
Yeah.
was renting out our space to do podcasts. The host had a fucking heart attack. And he was like
I didn't know
30,
that. Yeah.
31. You know, like just, I mean, the level of stress that this game can put on people is intense. I've heard, I mean, I don't know this guy. I actually heard this through the grapevine from one of his old producers,
Mhm.
but do you remember, oh no, I'm gonna forget his name. It was kind of the generation of YouTube before us, but he was like a special effects and stunt artist,
Mhm.
Asian guy. You know who I'm talking about?
I vaguely might.
Um,
Did you join?
someone in the someone
Yeah.
someone in the
Someone
chat
will
knows
get
what
it.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Anyway, this guy, huge on YouTube, ended up getting a Hulu show and just burned out
Mhm.
completely. And
Yeah.
so there's definitely something about uh and by the way, I feel like when I went through burnout in 2019, the term burnout wasn't used very often.
No.
Um, when I moved to Finland, I was surprised that like not only is it a legitimate medical diagnosis, but like, you know, if what happened to me happened here in Finland, they would have just said, "Oh, okay, you know, like here's 6 months paid off. They
Mhm.
can't even fire you if they want."
Well,
Freddie Wong. That's what
yeah, yeah.
someone people in the chat
Um,
got it. So yeah, he got super burned out. I met his producer at one point, and he told me the story, and I'm sure it's pretty widely known. I hope I'm not spilling
yeah.
beans that he doesn't want her to spill, but I heard it was a bad burnout.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm thinking of this, and actually, Gregory Ellick, who's in the chat, great editor. I owe him some footage later today that I'll have uploaded in a few. But thinking about that, because I'm finishing the filming on a video today that I've been working on like depression, and sort of some of the philosophy and neuroscience around it. But when I think about burnout and depression, all sort of stuff, like it's wild how much you talk to people, and I'm sure this is across the board. But yeah, the way in which it's almost like the way in which the logic and almost the algorithmic logic of digital media is then used, I'll be Kantian for a second, as like a transcendental structure that affects the people that work in it. So that it's almost like the ontology of digital media becomes the rules of existence that people have to operate within. And the reason people lose their shit is because it's not a human ontology in which to operate. It's not a method of existence that's conducive to happiness. And I know, you know, and again, we're gonna bounce around back and forth a lot. It's gonna be like a fucking Tarantino movie timeline wise, guys.
Yeah.
But you know, I've recently, as people know, because they're here, you know, with being laid off from Wisecrack, I'm leaning into just doing my own channel. But one of the first things I did was like reached out to some people who I respect and think do really good work to kind of ask like, how do you do it and how do you not lose your mind? You know, I'll shout this person out because he's been on the show and I know a bunch of you guys like him as well. One of my favorite YouTubers, Jared Henderson. Another a redhead Jared lives in Texas. But
Yeah, you told me about him. That blew my mind.
yeah, but yeah, I had a great talk. He took some time to talk to me over the weekend, kind of about what his experience has been like as someone who, you know, made YouTube his thing, and it's tough. So let's maybe jump to this then to jump back. So you guys start Wisecrack after trying out a bunch of different cool shit. Um, you know, it seems like at a certain point, because of both audience response and I imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, production cost, because I do know it's way cheaper to make a video essay than it is to do an Earthling Cinema or Thug Notes type thing, which is highly produced and has that sort of like Chappelle / Sesame Street vibe to it. You know, you eventually get to the point where it's, you know, 2 video essays a week. There's multiple podcasts happening. To inject myself into the narrative a little bit, if I remember this correctly, it was around the same time where I feel like you guys started testing out Helen and myself hosting sometimes. And
Yeah, I mean,
what was the logic there? Just sort of like, oh my God, did Jared Anderson log on right when I talked about it? Can you guys let Jared know we have not talked about him at all? Because he's a narcissistic guy. And I don't want this to get to his head. So Jared Henderson, we talked about you once, okay? But we do love you and we appreciate you. Thanks for being here. We have 2 Jareds in the chat, guys. But yeah, but my like understanding, maybe this is a conversation I'd had at one point back then with Jacob, was something like, we have a bazillion things going on. people, but there has to be some people besides Jared that can do it, or Jared's going to die.
That's definitely one way to put it. Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess really it was just like, well, we've only really tried one host. Maybe this guy's appeal is limited. Maybe we should try some other people. But also,
Yeah.
like, I just didn't really like doing it that much. Like, even
Yeah.
today when I make videos, like, the recording part is exhausting. Like any kind of performance like that. It's like, I have to put some energy into it. Got to make sure, my mouth isn't making gross noises when I'm
Yeah.
speaking. It's like, it's a performance. And I remember there was this one time that we got a deal with not Showtime. Maybe it was one of the studios, which was very rarely happened, but we were also always so grateful. And they had to fly me to Canada to do like a behind the
I
scenes
remember this.
featurette
Yeah.
on the movie that is actually out now, but I never saw it, called, oh man, my freaking memory. It's about like a Munchausen by proxy thing. Anyway, I called you and I was like, dude, do you want to go to Canada this
I
weekend?
remember this.
Yeah.
I remember where I was walking on the street when I got a call and was like, what? But yeah,
Yeah.
no, because I do, I feel like there is a sense in which your thing, or where, because I feel like there's some people who maybe like get energy from being out there, and to be armchair psychiatrist, my sense was always like, that is stuff that did not give you energy, that you weren't enthused about.
No, I mean, the
Doing
thing
all
that
that
I
stuff.
loved was working with the writers. I loved the
Yeah.
ideas. I loved working with the actors. I always saw myself as a behind the camera kind of person. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the real answer. But during that era, there's also another anecdote between the two of us
Mhm.
that I think also kind of animates where the company was at the time. Do you remember when I tasked you or hired you to make food content scripts?
I
And
do.
it was like
Yeah.
this weird thing where I think you were a little frustrated with me because I couldn't figure out how to make a wisecrack style food thing. And there was like these back and forths where I'm like, maybe go more into the history here. But then I was like, oh no, this is just a history video. It's kind of boring. And I think you and I had to have a phone conversation where I'm just like, dude, I'm so sorry. I really don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I remember being slightly annoyed with you and Jacob because there was like a series of conversations, and like it all makes sense to me looking back now, but where there was a point where I felt like, okay, I talked to these guys about doing stuff. I have not been paid for any of this, but I like working with these dudes, and it felt like there was like a drop off at one point, and I was just like, ugh. Which but it's a thing too where I understand what the context was, and I do. So correct me if I'm wrong here. It kind of felt like there was a time where you guys, and when I say you guys here, I really just mean you and Jacob, so no one else thinks I'm talking about them. We're trying to figure out like, okay, if this is going to expand as a business, we have to have other verticals that are different content things. And then maybe coming up against the fact that it also feels like that was happening maybe
I
in the
don't
last
have
era
like,
you could.
I'm not a business guy. Jacob
Yeah.
was the guy who had his finger to the market. He knew what was required to craft a narrative of success in the like fledgling digital media industry. And the answer at the time, and again, this shifted like every month because we were just scrambling. It's the startup life, man. You're just like scrambling not only from like, revenue, paycheck to paycheck, but you're also just trying to come up with ideas like, do we pivot? Do we pivot? There's also other stories about like projects that we did, at one point when growth started slowing down. But at that time, the idea was lifestyle brand. At the time, like, investors didn't want to hear that, like, oh, we've kind of made the grad school brand. How cool is that? They're like, wait, what? And there's a lot of guilt I had for that. Like, I felt like, because that's just kind of what I had in me. But, the deal was that we were making a successful business. That was, yeah.
Well, then at what point then? So like in my head now, I'm thinking, there's the era where, and this will get really, really behind the scenes for folks. So tuck in if that's what you like, or leave if it's not what you like. But there was an era where what Wisecrack, when I visualized what it was, There was an office in Silver Lake. It was kind of bustling. There was, the main office where stuff got filmed and a bunch of desks and a fridge with LaCroix or LaCroix, however one says it. Woody running
And
around
cold
holding
brew.
court. Way too much cold
Oh.
brew. I think I had at least 3 different panic attacks from hanging out at that office.
Woody's there on the couch.
Hell yeah, Woody.
Anyway.
For those who don't know, Woody's Jared's dog, is a legend in the field. But there was like podcast rooms. It was a really impressive outfit. And that's the era where, of course, you had obviously like Jared and Ryan and Alec and Lux and Amanda, a bunch of people working on Claire on like podcasts and stuff like that. At that point, occasionally I know Helen and myself were both hosting some stuff. And kind of getting worked into the rotation a little more there. And I think at some point in this era, if I remember correctly, is when you guys sold the channel. Because what I do remember, so here, this is my memory. There was a period where after some of the stuff you mentioned, like the food stuff and other things didn't pan out, I kind of didn't work on stuff for a little bit. And I remember, and then I got a full-time job doing something else. So I didn't have a ton of capacity. I remember getting an email from Joy at one point being like, hey, we have a new freelance payment system because we have a new parent company or something like that. Now I want to say, and this is all like public record, so I feel it's okay to say, this is when like the Omnia thing happened. When would that?
Yeah.
Was that 18?
So that was in July of 2019.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would say like the bustling era that you describe, I think, was more in like 2017.
Yeah.
Or 2016. 2016, 2017 were like big years for us. That was basically when we kind of discovered Rick and Morty, if I could be honest. Like
how have we gotten this far in without talking about
I know. That's also like a weird thing in my psyche is Rick and Morty.
I'm gonna leave a note just so we can get back to Rick and Morty potentially.
Yeah. So so the company was sold in 2019, and I think things had kind of started to slow down. So the reason I say 2017 was more like the hustle bustle area because we had the Squanch, which was a Rick and Morty podcast. We had the South Park podcast that Lux and Amanda were on. Then we also had like the idea was to do something kind of like the Ringer ended up doing, although I don't know if they ended up doing it at that time. Was we had a Claire was on Westworld podcast. So that's when we were really taking Westworld seriously. And I think like the business plan for like 2016, I believe, was to create like a bunch of podcasts. We did all these tests. We had people, writers that we know that worked on doing tests for like video game podcasts. We did an anime podcast test.
I did a test for a music podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember, that's one of the things I worked on for a while.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I forgot about it too.
So that was, I think, like that was like 2017. But I think things like growth had started to kind of slow down. We kind of sunset a lot of the podcasts by 2019 when we sold the company. So it wasn't that we sold it when like things were at their most active. And at that point, we largely had stopped experimenting with like lifestyle stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the Ringer...
Show Me the Meaning, of course. I forgot that too. Yeah.
That was the big boy. I mean, the Ringer comp is really interesting for folks that don't know. The Ringer's website started by Bill Simmons and some folks, came after Grantland and ESPN thing, which has largely gone from being a place where people wrote stuff to a podcast platform, got bought out by Spotify for bazillions of dollars. And their model now, and I listen to a lot of their stuff. I like a lot of people that work there. They have podcasts where people talk about every TV show and movie and sports things. And it's not even just one. Like, for example, last night, because I listen to podcasts when I fall asleep to turn off my anxious mind, there was 3 different Ringer podcasts with 3 different groups of people talking about Thunderbolts. So if I wanted to last night, I didn't do this, I could have listened to 5 hours of audio content about one movie from one place. But it does. I mean, there's parts of some of that era where I feel like, oh man, if that would have been happening and that would have overlapped with like Spotify being at a certain point, you know what I mean? You could see like an alternate history. But so at what point, and if this gets and Sarah Kaplan in the chat says 2016, the year I got to write the BoJack episode. My full-time job was running the Facebook pivot to video content. I remember. Oh, I also remember the Facebook
Oh,
era because there was some stuff that, and I relatively recently, found some of the footage from the Facebook shows to get to Ryan Haley for his reel.
was it the ethics of butt chugging?
It was indeed the ethics of butt chugging. So, but yeah, that's
I love
another
that
era
video.
I
Well, yeah,
remember.
so that was God, that was another you know, I remember when Trump was elected, I wondered to myself, how would the company's fortunes have been different if he didn't win? One of the
Mhm.
things that I think was a direct result is, once, at the time Zuckerberg was like, "Oh crap, I can't believe this actually happened. Did I have
Mhm.
something to do with this?" And then he like shut off Facebook video.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks before this happened, we hired a guy. We hired AJ Unitas.
Yep.
Brilliant guy, great
Great
comedian. His
dude.
full-time job was to create Facebook content. And then overnight, Zuckerberg just hits a switch, and all that stuff is now,
Yeah.
like videos just not monetized, just not promoted, nothing. That eventually ended up kind of reversing, but not until years later.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, the 2016, that was quite a time. Um,
So then to jump back, then what led to? So like you said, there was kind of that era. I do, because again, a lot of this I was like in and out of. I remember the Facebook era because I remember I helped out a little bit with the format you guys had. It was called like the big questions or something. Um,
oh yeah,
I
gosh.
remember I remember filming that on a day where I had like a horrible sinus infection, but I didn't want to miss it, so I took way too many meds. So I drank a Red Bull before, so I think I kind of methed myself inadvertently. Um,
Is this the one where you were on a couch? Was Nathan Lowe
yep.
also there? Yeah,
hmm
okay, I remember this.
And it was very fun, but I was in a hallucinatory state, and I remember getting really obsessed with the thought of Jesus masturbating. It came up somehow. It was
That's
like
what
in one of the
happens when
questions.
those antihistamines, man. That'll
Yeah.
that'll put those
Um,
ideas in your head.
So it's sort of then it feels like there was the real crazy peak that involves, investment money and Facebook stuff and all these podcasts and all these shows and the Rick and Morty bump and all these sort of
Let
things.
me
Oh, go ahead.
let me just back up a second. So the first investment money came after we sold the Thug Notes book. So there was like two or
Oh
three
yeah.
rounds of investment. The first one, I mean, all of which were very small, or relatively small. But the first one came after we sold the Thug Notes book. And
Mhm.
then that was in like 2013 or 2014. And honestly, the 6 months of me writing Thug Notes episodes,
Ooh.
8-Bit Philosophy episodes, and the Thug Notes book
Whew.
is honestly a black hole that I don't remember. Oh, co-wrote it. Co-wrote.
Yeah.
Honestly, a black hole that I don't really remember. Like that's
Yeah.
like just like gone. Like that half of a year, because we had to write the whole book in 6 months.
Yeah.
But
I think
anyway,
that.
we raised initial funds after that. But in like 2015, 2016, I think was the second round.
All right. And then so 2019, you guys sell the channel to, and this is like the maybe two in the weeds. Was it sold to Omnia or sold to Blue Ant? If that
I
matters.
guess. Um, well, in my mind, it was sold to Blue Ant. I don't know what it actually said
Yeah.
on paper, but I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
Omni was just like the digital media arm of that company.
Yeah. So what led? And again, say what you're comfortable saying or whatever. But what led to the decision to sell the channel that? And correct me if I'm wrong. Up until that point, was just owned by so like you, Jacob, and Todd or something, or some
Well,
initial group
and investors,
investors. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
there was the cap table.
Oh, okay.
Because the industry was going down.
Yeah.
I mean, like at the time in 2015, when we thought of like who would we love to be, who would be just like the perfect example of who in our like wildest dreams we would aspire to create a community and a roster of channels like that, and the answer was Rooster Teeth.
hmm
Rooster Teeth shut down entirely last
Yeah.
year. Jacob was smart enough to know that's the direction things were going.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that.
Yeah. So you're just kind of were realistic about it and saw, and that was like the offer, or that was the deal that you guys.
Well, I mean, there was a time. Um, I don't think this is privileged information, but there was a time when there was an offer that we really wanted to take.
Mhm.
There was an offer that was from, I believe it was CBS.
Mhm.
CBS was interested in buying us. Jacob and I were so stressed out, and I really wish Jacob was here to speak for himself,
Yeah.
because I don't think he would mind me telling this story because I mean I think it's understandable how stressed we were at the time. But Jacob had to go on a flight to San Francisco to meet like the CFO of CBS, and he was so stressed out that his back gave out
Oh, yeah,
on the
yeah.
way to the airport.
Oh,
And that was just kind of that was just what we were dealing with. And the deal ended up not going through, unfortunately.
yeah.
But it was not an easy thing where it's just like, oh, there's these people are offering to buy the channel. It was a very long process. The amount of work that Jacob put
Mm,
in to I mean, the amount of paperwork when you sell a company is
mm,
literally insane. I mean,
yeah.
it's like a book,
I
and
can't even imagine.
Jacob, I didn't help at all, to be perfectly honest. I was,
You're not the
mostly just
business guy.
focused. I was not the business guy, but I mean, he moved him out.
Yeah. Well, now we'll go a little Rashomon style here for a second. So my POV on some of this, right, is that I remember when the sale happened. So I remember getting an email that was like, we're changing our freelance payment system. And then I remember, let's see if I'm going to get this right here. It would have been maybe October of 2019. I remember having, I think I hosted a video, and it was the first time I'd hosted in like a while, maybe 6 months, maybe even a year. And I remember having a talk with Jacob about like, hey, do you think you maybe would want to like come back to, do some more stuff regularly? And I think that was the first time it was ever floated to me. And maybe like full time or something. Actually, that's not true. I think there was one other time, like 2 years before. I think when there was some money around, it was like there was a time, and this was from Jacob, not from you. So I'm not throwing you under the bus here, or Jacob under the bus, who I love. But there was like, hey, maybe there could be a full time thing. But I remember at the end of 2019, some sort of conversation about that with Jacob. And at the time, I had a job where I didn't love what I was doing. It was when I was working for, yeah, the place Jump Cut.
Oh, I thought it was called Shortcuts, but you're right. It is
Yeah,
Jump
yeah.
Cut.
And it was,
Well,
yeah, yeah. But I
I actually have
remember
something to
that
say
thing.
about
Yeah.
that. I don't know if you know this, but like that company made a huge splash because they made like $12 million in a year selling
Yes.
courses on how to go viral on
Yes.
YouTube. And that was like sent, and the business end of our company, God bless them, are like, desperately trying to find avenues for like that kind of
Oh,
revenue.
yeah.
And so we started, or we basically filmed an ad for something kind of similar. It was called Backstage Courses, but it was going to be more about like teaching, like academic courses and stuff like that. But it never, that was just something that we never actually ended up building because it was either build this and see if we can give the investors what they signed up for, because you know uh, I don't know the specifics, but it seemed like it was unlikely with the way that things were going on the channel, or we just
Yeah.
sell it and get out.
Because yeah, and I remember that was part of the conversation. Again, hopefully this isn't too privileged. I don't think it is. With Jacob, was something like, "Oh, hey, you have been working for this place that does this course stuff. We are thinking about maybe doing something like that."
Okay,
Yada
okay.
yada. Um,
But hold on, just going back, that I maybe this is my selective memory. I don't remember you taking a break from on the channel, because what I remember is that it was like, I don't know, maybe once a month you and Helen just like, when I just like didn't want it, because I remember like you did.
yeah,
I feel like your first video was the Daredevil
it
video or
was.
something
It
like
was.
that. Yeah.
That's good
And
memory.
then I remember you did the Joker video.
Mhm.
There's probably a long time between those, but I guess I didn't remember that there was like a break time.
Yeah, well, it was funny too because there was a period where I remember that everything I wrote, you hosted, and then everything I hosted, someone else wrote, and I forget what it was, but there was a time where it was the first video I remember where it was something I wrote, I got to host, which was fun. But yeah, I mean, and I don't know how big of a break it was, and I think part of it was like this was coming out of the era where there was some stuff that we were working on that just didn't pan out, and then I started working full time at this place, Jump Cut, and part of it was just like I was busy and then had a full time salary, so I was
Well,
less able to do
I
stuff.
mean, again, like the truth here is going to be mundane, but if
Yeah,
that happened, it's for a very simple reason, and it's to cut costs.
yeah, of course.
We at that time we had to let Ryan go. We had to let AJ go.
Hmm.
Um, it was very, very painful.
But I will say when I got that job, the Wisecrack thing helped because the guys that started that company, even though they're kind of skeezy and came out of like the pickup artist world, which I didn't know when I started working there, and none of us did. There was a wave of us that got hired. One of us found out they used to be pickup artists, and we had a secret dinner where half of I shouldn't be saying any of this, but I just am, where half of us went out, and it was honestly me and a group of one other dude and like 5 women. And I think rightfully so, the women in particular were like, holy shit, we're working for dudes that used to make videos that were like, this is how you can trick women into fucking you. And we had to have this meeting that was like, what do we do? And then we had we set up a meeting with the dude that ran it to be like, hey, we didn't know this. It's making us feel kind of weird. Can we just like talk about it and get it out in the open? And respect to the dude that ran that company at the time was like cool about it and heard us out and talked about how that was like one part of his life and yada, yada. But I do remember randomly applying for that job and then hearing back and having a meeting and the CEO being like, oh, I fucking love Wisecrack. And I was like, oh, cool. But then for me, it was, and I think this overlaps with elements of stuff happening with you. I want to say it was either late 2019 or early 2020 where you took some time off, because there was a time where I think it was 4 months or 6 months or something, but it was very like, I got a call from Jacob one day, and then like 4 days later, I was on like a 4-6 month contract doing writing and hosting. And that was the first time I was like around and coming into the office and stuff. And part of that time, I remember you being maybe like half there, like in and out sometimes. And then for part of that, I think you were gone for a bit.
Yeah, there was a time, like around the time that you did the Joker video, things were kind of falling apart for me health-wise. And then eventually I just had to step away entirely. And then I did come back, but and then COVID happened. And I think COVID plus going through that just was a bad mix.
Yeah. Cause I think I'm 90% sure that my contract that I was on ended in the month of April 2020. So I think the first month or the first chunk of COVID, I was still working on a contract basis full time. And I remember the transition of figuring out, because actually the day before the shutdown, for those who remember, there was a series that Jared developed, The Good, the Bad, and the Brilliant, which was like a more conversational thing.
Yeah.
The day before the world shut down, I was in there all day, and I filmed with Jamie Loftus and Billy Domino, and it was either Alec or Helen or something. And I remember that day, like it was the first time there was like hand sanitizer everywhere, and no one was really like sure of what was happening and all this sort of stuff. And right after that, everything shuts down. It was very quickly a pivot to like, okay, we're filming on phones and webcams in people's houses and syncing up audio in weird ways. I remember doing some test stuff there. And then April of that year, I stopped working at Wisecrack. And then I think it was July of 2020 that I think that's when you officially left. And
that
then
right.
I came on, and I mean, I'll say this to Jared and the people watching. It was like a really weird one for me, because I remember it was incredibly like melon, maybe bittersweet's a better way to put it, because like it was cool to be working full time at Wisecrack because it was a thing I loved doing. I loved the channel. I loved like the people. So it was like, oh, I get to work with Alec and Lux and Amanda and Evan, all these people. But then it was like, oh, it sucks ass that the reason this is happening is because Jared like isn't there. You know, I think there was almost a sense of like,
I'm sorry to put you in that position.
No, you didn't at all. That was a call coming from inside the house stuff. Almost like a sort of like guilt, because I think in my head, because there was a few times where I almost came on, or I was there on contract, and it was like I was there along with you, and that like felt cool. And I remember too, there was a time where it was sort of talking to you and Jacob at the period where I was there full time and you were there, and it was like, oh, cool. Now there's time for like Jared can focus on X, Y, and Z. Burns can pick up some space here to make more room for Jared to do stuff, yada, yada.
Wait,
But
was there a time? There was a time when you were there. I thought that
yeah,
I
there was
had
a
left
brief
by the time
period.
oh, the way I remember it, and of course my memory's
Yeah.
probably unreliable. My memory was that like when I said that I was gonna, oh maybe, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
the way I remember it is that like because I was leaving, it was like, all right, Burns full time. You know.
Yeah, it was something like that. And you know, it was a thing too where like I remember, you know, it was the middle of a pandemic, so like there wasn't jobs. So I remember it was a weird one where like I couldn't also even if I didn't want to do it, I probably couldn't say no. I remember I got very lowballed on that initial salary because I feel like the person who was in charge of Omni at that point knew we were in the middle of a pandemic. So what was I going to do? Get another job? but but at
I
that
think
point,
the pandemic is why the channel was sold
yeah,
to enthusiasts, because Blue Ant made a significant amount of its money from live like production,
yeah.
and that all went to zero.
Yeah. So Mike Luxembourg in the chat now. So what's up? He remembers Alec asking, "Can you direct everything for a while?" I mean, like, "Oh yeah, I'm down." He said, "Jared's leaving." Yeah. Yeah. I think Lux came on full time a little after I did. Cause when I started, so when I came on full time, Alec had kind of taken the throne and was king of the castle. Um, and then I came on, Amanda was already there, and Lux. I mean, are you, because I mean, I think people are interested in this. I don't, but maybe you're not, Jared. Are you cool if I talk a little bit about what happened like after you left from the?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
You
because
mean like from the company?
well, yeah, because I think it's interesting too that there's like, because the thing that's so weird to me is that the channel was around, you know, I guess it's legally speaking still around, but you know, there's a sense in which it feels like you leaving the channel was recently, but it was like 5 years ago. So there's then
No,
this
and you have
5 year
been
period.
hosting the channel for about as long, maybe even slightly longer than I was.
Yeah, and you know, I would say, and maybe people are interested in hearing about this, but super interesting and difficult in that, you know, you leave middle of a pandemic, I take over, and one thing that was right off the bat that was so different is that when I came on to host, I think something was happening that hadn't happened before, which is like you were the host and you were also the head writer, head producer, whatever. And when I came on, there was sort of like Alec and Amanda were very in charge of the content stuff. And I was kind of like just hosting. And there was a thing, and I can like totally admit this now, and people in the audience noted it early on. I think there was a big chunk of time where I was kind of unconsciously doing like Jared cosplay or something. And by that, I mean, I don't think there was time for the writing, the voice of the scripts to change at all. So I think like what sort of happened is when you left, there was a window where all the scripts were basically written as they were when you were there, but now it was me saying them. And I do think this is the only crumb I'm going to give to the Where's Jared crowd. The only crumb I'm giving you. So if you're here to hate on me, this is the one thing I'm going to give you. You're absolutely right that there was a period where it did probably feel a little bit off because I think some of the audience was like, okay, well, Jared's gone. Burns is here all the time now. But then the scripts kind of, the voice of the channel hasn't changed. So it's almost like, you know, not the worst of both worlds, but like this weird uncanny valley as we kind of had to like figure out what the channel was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. But I mean, again, I would guess that there's probably like 20 to 30 videos that you hosted while I was still there. And, you
Yeah.
know, it was the same formula. It was like, hey, Wisecrack Michael here, you know, in that same voice. I remember there was one script. It was on semiotics and Fight Club
Uh-huh.
where I was planning on hosting it. And then like there was this whole thing that our writer Leo had put in about my dog Woody, and
Oh,
we just had to edit it to Jared's dog Woody because
yeah.
you were reading it. So I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, in a sense, it's like, and that's one of the challenges of YouTube, where it's like, okay, this is a brand, but YouTube is a space for personalities. People expect this
Yeah.
personality. Is the personality the brand? Now that I'm the personality, do I now put the brand somewhere else? I mean, the inevitable answer is yes. That's what you have to do. That's
Yeah.
your job. You know, you're not going to be successful cosplaying as someone else. You got to take it where, you know, you feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, I mean, this is Chris Maverick in the chat says there's an odd shift where Burns sort of becomes himself. It's a different kind of humor. Yeah, I mean, and I think like when I think about the era of you know, after you left the channel, in one sense, it's a miracle that it lasted in the form that it was in for as long as it did, because there was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of dips, and I think just from my perspective, I almost think it was like probably a 1.5 to 2 year process to for me to like find my voice, kind of what Chris in the chat just said, and then B, to convince the team that we could lean into that. And it's a thing where like I'm someone who's I again, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I am probably more like comfortable or down for public facing stuff than you. I kind of like it sometimes, but at the same time, I hate self advocating and self promotion and stuff like that. So there was like a year for me where I really was kind of like, hey guys, I don't maybe I can joke around a little bit more. Like, hey, maybe I can say these things that are more, you know, feel more conducive to like who I am as a human. And
yeah, I mean, that's what you got to do.
yeah,
I remember, I mean, I hope you
that.
won't mind me bringing this up,
Do
but
it.
like, I remember coaching you you were
Oh
like,
yeah.
dude, how do I fucking read a teleprompter and not look like I'm reading?
Oh
Dude,
my God. Yeah.
now you're a fucking pro.
Oh,
I mean, not at a teleprompter, but at this whole thing. I mean, I don't, if you don't mind me saying, you were pretty nervous at the beginning.
Oh my God, I was horrifically nervous. And, you know, and the way that we film stuff, so everyone knows, I remember like the first thing, it's like you're in an open office space, standing where like you and Jacob told me to stand. There's like 4 or 5 people in the room. Never read a prompter before. And, you know, it's very funny because like Jacob especially has the sort of like good cop thing sometimes where he can be like, great. So this one, maybe just think about this, or like kind of like almost like a thing where it's like, oh, but my brain's like, oh, I'm fucking up. He's being nice because I'm fucking up. And there was one time, I want to say it was like the 3rd or 4th video I ever did. I said to Callie, my wife, something like, I don't know if I can do this. The prompter sucks. And she was like, well, should you take like an edible or something before? Will that help relax you? And I did it.
You?
Did not
Which
help.
video?
I want to find it. I actually once.
Of course you forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned this story on a stream like 3 years ago, and then someone was like, I'm going to go find the one. But you know, it was, but it was, there was a sort of like period, I think, of identity crisis. And then I think the thing that also happened is, and this is, so for example, one of the things that people that look at like you leaving as this hard break and will say that I ruined the channel. But just to be clear, I didn't ruin it. Alec Opperman ruined it. I was just hosting. Anything you hate about that era, Alec Opperman did. Alec Opperman, spell it right, guys. But I think there was also this shift where, you know, in 2018, 2019, whatever, most of the videos on the channel were media analysis. And I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, you know, Alec started doing some videos that were more like weird science shit or conspiracy theory stuff, or more kind of like cultural and social analysis things.
That's right.
And then I know that Amanda Shirker kind of was writing some of that stuff as well, because that had to do with some of her background. And then I felt like, especially because, you know, you think when you first leave, middle of 2020, world historical pandemic, sort of political collapse and chaos going on. This was leading into the 2020 election. It just felt like there was a time where it was hard not to talk about that stuff, and B, a lot of the people on the team, I think, were excited to talk about that stuff, or at least interested. And I think some people look at that as like a big point of shift in the channel, and they're not like wrong, because if you look at, you know, in the last few years of Wisecrack, it became almost completely video essays about social, cultural stuff, tech stuff. There was a period, and people probably won't believe this, where the algorithm, because the YouTube algorithm does weird things. It puts you in a box, and you can't tell YouTube what box you're in. YouTube tells you what box you're in. And there was a point where like we almost saw the shift happen in real time, where the videos on socio-political cultural stuff would do well. Then we put out a film analysis thing and it would do like half the numbers of the other stuff.
Yeah.
And that happened so much. I think some people thought at one point that we stopped doing that because we didn't care, because we didn't want to, because only Jared cared about that stuff. But part of it was an algorithm thing.
Oh, of course. I mean, every decision that we've talked about in terms of the building of the company, the direction the company took, there were always discussions about the algorithm in the background, always.
Yeah,
And by the way, there were times where I considered the same kind of shift that you described went on. I just didn't think I kind of had it in me. And
mhm,
also there is an element of you're kind of always chasing the thing in front of you. And like if we
it's hard.
had some success with it's like, well, do we start, especially like when you're trying to sell the company, if I said all of a sudden we're going to do politics now, um, you're not going to be able to tell people who are potentially interested in buying your company. It's like, yeah, it's going to take like 6 months for the algorithm to relearn. And by the way, this algorithm is a complete black box, and this is completely hypothetical. We don't know if it'll ever happen because for some channels it never did happen. Like
Mhm.
that just wasn't a possibility. But and I've always wondered, and maybe you can tell me if my hypothesis is
Yeah,
correct, because this is what we were thinking when we considered talking, kind of pivoting more towards social issues. First of all, we would have never really been able to done it with me at the helm, because I just don't have the temperament for that. My
mhm,
love is really with movies.
yeah,
But um, the idea was simply that, like, okay, maybe things are not going so well because we can't assume that people have seen the movies. Not
mhm,
everyone has seen every movie, whereas everybody, has some stake in social issues. So the idea was just simply that, like, all right, you want to build a channel which people watch every upload, but if we do the Avengers on Friday and then
mhm.
we do Pulp Fiction on Monday, and the people who have seen the Avengers haven't seen Pulp Fiction, the algorithm is going to punish you. That was
Yeah.
kind of like, we were like, all right, maybe this is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we sort of realized is there was this shift, and I do think some of this accompanies the kind of COVID era, because there was a period where everyone saw every Marvel movie, and everyone saw every
Oh yeah.
Christopher Nolan movie, and everyone watched Game of Thrones, and
Mhm.
everyone watched the first season of Homelander or whatever else it was, and of course everyone watched Rick and Morty for a bit, and it made it so much easier to do that, but it does feel like people's media diets shifted so much, and monocultural watching wasn't as much of a thing. And I think on top of that, if you look at what happened, there was an era where, again, this kind of in the era after you leave and stuff is really when like new rock stars starts taking off, and with
It
something
it's
like their
I was just gonna
model.
mention them.
Yeah. And the difference between, and this will give everyone some sense of like production timeline stuff, the way new rock stars, makes videos sometimes is like they will see a movie and within 48 hours they are putting a video out about that movie. The way it worked, even at like the quickest clip, at least in my time at Wisecrack, is like maybe within a week. Maybe there was a couple times we got something out a little bit quicker, but once there became so many immediate media reaction channels and podcast, it's harder when you put careful thought into being like, ooh, how Horkheimer helps us understand the motive of Black Widow in
Yeah.
Endgame. And then by the time it comes out, everyone's like, I've already consumed 37 hours of content about
Yeah,
that
I
thing.
know.
And also,
But even if you take the writing part out of it, that, like, we kinda held ourselves to this standard, or we're like, "Okay, well, there just has to be something wisecrack about it. There has to be, like, some kind of an idea, some kind of lesson, some kind of introducing new concepts to people," which, maybe I was too sacred about. But even if you take that out, there was this weird thing where, because we were like a company and, we had employees, and we
mhm,
more or less, although Alec will rightfully challenge me on this, we more or less respected people's like 9 to 5 schedule.
yeah.
It was this weird thing where it's like, well, we have investors, we have money, and yet there are these other channels that can get things out a lot quicker than us. And at the end of the day, you just can't you can't compete with people who are just passionate. Maybe if I was
Mhm,
being less charitable with my terms, you can't compete with the autism.
mhm.
In the internet, that stuff's just like, and yeah, like I remember whenever we would do like weekly South Park or weekly Rick and Morty quick takes, I was just praying that, like, if the South Park episode came out on Wednesday, that we had a prayer to release it on Tuesday. So we had
Yeah.
one day before it became irrelevant, and then the new South Park episode came, because we didn't have a full-time editor in-house. We had to, send it to a contractor. We had to assume that contractor was available. Same thing with the writers
Yeah.
sometimes.
No, for sure. I remember occasionally getting like messages that would be like, "Hey, can you see this movie in 2 hours and come up with an idea?" And there was the era, and this is, I think, one of the biggest things that carried over from, to be really, really reductive here, the Jared era to the Burns era or whatever, is we still Rick and Morty'd for a bit. So I think we did maybe 2 seasons of the Squanch after you left.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say one of the happiest moments of my life is when I realized we didn't have to cover Rick and Morty anymore. And that's not because I'm saying I don't like the show. In general, liked it just fine. I mean, to be honest, I don't think I'm fully caught up, but the pressure to like, and I remember this, like every Sunday night, staying up to watch the episode, texting Lux or whatever about weird things. First thing Monday, having to be like, okay, can we come up with an outline? Okay, if we get the outline done on Monday, we can write it. Okay, we'll film it Wednesday. And if we get a quick edit done, we can get it Friday. And again, like the same thing you said, then we can put it out before the next one. And that just feels so unsustainable
Oh yeah.
as a way to operate. And then it just feels so unsustainable in terms of like making a company work, like having the financial viability of your company be your ability to turn around content about a TV show that might come out with a new season or might not.
Or if the episode is interesting or isn't. There were so many
Yeah.
times where it's like, hey, is there an angle to the angle is what we're always looking for. Is
Yeah.
there an angle to last night's Rick and Morty? Well, we really want to be profitable this month, so there better be an angle to fucking Rick and Morty last. And yeah,
Yeah.
that was like a super toxic scenario, but it was what it was. And like those new rock stars guys, they work their ass off, and
Yeah.
I have heard that even they suffered from the fall of the monoculture, but like they were it's, models like that, they're less limited by the lack of an angle, especially if
Yeah.
you hold yourself to being able to like have to do some kind of a lesson. And yeah, the Rick and Morty thing was weird, and that's kind of when I came to realize there's like it's a double-edged sword when you're engaged with something that you love, because what
Mm-hmm.
happens if you stop loving it?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
with Rick and Morty, those first 2 seasons, I actually really did like it a lot. I was really
They're
excited
so
about
good.
it. But then I just, maybe it was just a shift in myself, and maybe it was, kind of the cultural context surrounding Rick and Morty love got a little bit kind of gross for a bit, but I just stopped liking the show. But there was an imperative on me to continue inhabiting the character
Mm.
of the person who loves the show. And there's just something, I don't know, like it's one thing to pretend to like something that you just don't care about.
Mm.
But like imagine, like the movie Ratatouille, like the critic character, the villain, it probably wouldn't be so painful for him to have to pretend to like a pair of shoes, but for him to pretend to like food that he doesn't like would be disastrous.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember like a joy for me when we stopped covering media as much was I started enjoying watching stuff more.
Yes.
Because my
Dude.
brain got infected at a certain point where any TV or movie I watched, I found myself thinking like, what's the angle, or like, what's the video essay thing here? And in a sense, like I'd rather watch something, and if I'm going to overthink it, I'd rather think like, oh, what was the character development like, or what were the choices the director made that made this scene so affecting? Things that I want to think about just as someone that likes art
Yeah.
and media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, here I'll bounce around a little bit. Also, if you have any questions about anything that happened after you left, feel free. But
Well, the big question was, I was curious about like if there was kind of an algorithmic
yeah,
reason for that shift.
yeah. So it was, I think, algorithmic. It was to do as well with like who were the freelance writers that were able to do stuff, and what were
Mhm.
their areas and things they could hit, what stuff was working the best. And so to give some context as well, like, so when Jared leaves, guys, Wisecrack is owned by a company, but it still feels in the day-to-day workflow relatively similar to my experience, at least being there pre-acquisition or whatever. But then I think like a few months after I come on full time, the company that bought Wisecrack got bought by another company. So initially it was Wisecrack was a part of Omnia Media, that was a part of Blue Ant Media. And then Blue Ant Media sells Omnia Media to a company called Enthusiast Gaming. And that's where things got very different, because now all of a sudden, Wisecrack is operating in a pretty big tent, and every single property in this company is about like gaming media and esports. And all of a sudden, we are making like video essays about like, is Bong Joon-ho a Marxist or something? And it was such a weird thing. And early on, my initial thought, I remember the morning of the acquisition, because I like woke up, looked at my phone, had like a Slack message from the person who ran Omnia or whatever at that point. There was like, everyone needs to be on a call in like 15 minutes. So my first thought is like, oh, getting fired. And then we get on the call, and then we learn about the acquisition. And, as the person's like, it's this company called Enthusiast, and I'm, obviously not paying attention to the call then and just Googling and looking at this company. And I was like, there's no way they're going to keep us. There's no universe where this company is going to want to continue to invest in us, because there's almost no overlap between what that company's stated goals are and being like the number one esports brand and Wisecrack.
Yeah, but
Um,
sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
do it.
You got to give yourself credit that at least on YouTube, even though all of the other Omnia properties were video game related, Wisecrack was the one that succeeded the most.
Yes. And I think that for a while, that is what helped us. And I remember there was some meeting early on, and I was like, okay, I got to put on my bullshit hat right now. And how do I pitch to these people? How do I describe what we're doing? And the pitch sort of became like, we are what gamers watch when they're not gaming. You know what I mean? And then there's like a truth to that, right? But like, it was sort of like, like it's like, it's like a cable, it's like a last week tonight for gamers or something like that, like an internet culture breakdown, blah, 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 which at least, spoke to some of those folks. But, I think that's the point then where we go through this phase of eras. And I've a bunch of this I've talked about before, so it's not that wild. But there is the era where they wanted us to stop making YouTube videos and only do TikToks. And the logic for only doing TikToks was that a person who was running content at that company, the whole business plan was they would sell TikTok deals and buy all the views, because it was so cheap to buy views. You would sell like a brand deal, and 50% of your budget would go towards just buying the views. But then the other 50% would be your profit.
See, that makes sense. But I remember I was looking at the Wisecrack Instagram, and I saw this video with Helen talking about Barbie, and I was like, oh, they clipped a YouTube video. But then I went on YouTube, I was like, wait, where's the video?
Yeah. So there was a lot of pressure at one point to do TikTok. Then there was pressure to do other formats and to have a bunch of different shows. And this is to me, like looking back, it's definitely a thing where like, I think they wanted us to do something that was 5 years too late. And I almost think like at the precise time that if you look at trends on YouTube, most of the most popular channels are people's names. It's just like a person that's into something. And as that is,
are you talking about this is the era when you did like Hot Take and Science is Hard?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I remember getting that script, the Science is Hard script, loved it.
Oh yeah, because that's something
that was funny. Yeah,
that was something we
I was still there.
Yeah. And that was even like and with some of this stuff, like the Science is Hard thing, fun format. I really liked the few things we made. It just wasn't the audience that was coming to Wisecrack to watch Wisecrack videos didn't want to watch that. It was just a different thing. And it should have been a different channel or a different feed or something.
Well, it's like you said before. If it's different content, it's going to require a very significant investment of uploading things like that for a very long time. And I imagine from looking at those videos, they were more expensive than you talking in front of a camera. This is the exact, I don't know if you remember, but in 2016 or 2017, we also had a pilot season. We had, there was like this video that Alec wrote that was fantastic called The Internet Was a Mistake. There was a video that we made on Fahrenheit 451 that my friend Tyler, who works at Titmouse, who like animated on Beavis and Butthead, she did her own custom style for it. It was one of the like highest production value videos we ever did. There was something else too. Oh, there was the Film Tourist, which I was super proud
so
of.
cool. That was one of the coolest things I feel like that Wisecrack ever did.
But it was the same thing. It was that these things, like, it's premium. We want to give we want to, spread our wings. We want to create content that is going to really be really exciting. That costs money. You're going to have to employ talented people.
Yeah.
And, the way that YouTube is built is that in order to do that properly, it requires a very significant investment that just isn't realistic.
Yeah. So we have this era where I'll just keep saying where they wants us to keep making different stuff. And, a lot of stuff that didn't feel like the most natural fit. Like the hot takes thing was like, it was fun. It was fun to have Greg and Helen and other folks come and like hang out. But
And Tommy Cook.
Oh, Tommy's the best. And the funniest
Yes.
part about that was, I remember when we filmed, there was, you had Greg, you had Riley Anspaugh, who's a part of like the Headgum Network and does like a very, accomplished comedian. But it was like Tommy Cook, the writer guy, who just crushed. And was so good. Because sometimes it's like, I think what we found in that too is sometimes it's the people that aren't trying to be funny that do the best job because they're just like really committed to their takes. But so we kind of, but that era was tough. Like that was an era, and we got to a point for a while where like views were really bad, like really, really, really bad. And one of the shifts I remember being a point where it was like, well, okay, we got a little something here. There was the era where we started streaming, which I felt like that ended up being the practice space for me to soft launch my own personality and see and build and also just get a more direct relationship with the community. And it made me feel the more of the sense of like, okay, I know who we're making stuff for. Like, we're not making stuff for random people. Like there's people like in this chat, like I've seen like Eddie and Chris and Evan and all these people who've been around for a while. It's like, okay, like I know who we're making stuff for. And it made me feel more comfortable because, there was an era where I think I described it to Evan or Olivia or someone. I was like, I need you guys to give me permission. I think I called it the Let Burns Cook era, where I was like, it was the first time I said, we're going to film. Let me say stuff that's not on the script. Like when we're filming, I'm going to like riff a bit and I might have an aside about something, or I might tell a story that comes from something in the script. And when we started putting some of that stuff in the videos, they started to feel just a bit more like personal, a bit more fun. And then sometimes, and this isn't the reason to do it, but those are the things that then people respond to and comment on. Like I tell a dumb story about the time I got kicked out of a theme park, and then like people want to hear about that story, and then they come hang out on a stream and we talk about it. So I felt like that was like a positive sort of moment for us, and where things started to, and that kind of overlapped with the time where the people at the company that wanted us to make all these different formats left. And we finally had some people in charge at Enthusiast who were sort of like, just do the stuff that you guys do. Like, do what you do and do it well. Let us help you do it well. We will give you resources if you need it. And that was like maybe the last like year and a half or so. And then, a thing that happened, things were like already kind of on a pretty good upward swing. Then I made the argument to bring Alec Opperman in last year and do some consulting for us. Because I really wanted to have like an outside POV from someone who knows the channel. But, Alec has gone on to do so much cool stuff on YouTube. Most of you guys know this. But he makes some of the best videos at More Perfect Union that do just cuckoo's bananas numbers. And also has his own channel. Please do subscribe to that. But, then like Alec came in and started giving us some thoughts. And the wildest thing is, I know I'm skipping ahead here if people in the chat have questions, or if Jared has thoughts, we can talk about it. I will just say, leading up to the layoffs, because again, public information, this isn't crazy. In April or last month, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we all got laid off. We had, if we're going to use quarter language, we'd had our most successful quarter in like 4 or 5 years. We started to regularly, because there was a period where like, honestly, if something hit 100,000 in 2 weeks, we were like, thank God. And then we started getting to this point where like every third video, would be like 500,000 or more. And So yeah, it was really interesting because I feel like sometimes you assume, or at least I had assumed, that whenever the thing kind of stopped being a thing, it would be because it didn't work anymore, because eventually too much of the team left, because of whatever. But it was just a really interesting experience that in a sense, it really felt like we had cracked the code finally on what does it look like for Wisecrack to continue to exist in YouTube circa 2025, and what does
Right.
it mean to like keep a foot in what the channel is and what it's meant to people. What does it mean to keep a foot in, I guess, a more contemporary sense of what YouTube is? And then part of this as well, in terms of like analytics, we talked about this before. I would say one of the big analytic points that mattered a lot to us was the who the audience was watching thing. And that's where there was a huge shift. So it kind of
Mhm.
went from like, to be really reductive, like the film theory type channels of the world for a while. When I'd look at that tab, that's who was watching us. And then it became like, who your channel watches, Hassan Piker, reaction channels, some more news, video essayists like Alice Capel and Tom Nichols and Jared Henderson, people more, channels like Then and Now, people more in the critical theory essays space and stuff like that. So I
Right.
think we kind of had to realize like, okay, that's like the niche we are in now. We did not used to be in that niche. That's the niche that we're in. How do we do what we do in a way that's true to who we are, but in a way that acknowledges like these are the people watching the channel? And I do think for me, like a thing I always thought about is, of course, stuff, stuff got like more political on the channel, I think for a variety of reasons. One, post 2020, one, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think I'm probably just a more publicly political person than you. You know what I mean? Like I say stuff and I've always been obnoxious on the internet and I'm kind of sometimes overly comfortable expressing things. Now,
I think you also just probably have a more defined political program than I do, but
sure. Yeah. And then, we have people like, as the team got smaller, like, Michael Luxembourg. No one has ever said that guy doesn't have political takes. Um, and, so I think there's like a lot of reasons that happens, but a thing for us that I think always felt, at least in my mind, what made it still wisecracky is we were, with very few exceptions, always tried to stay in that space of like, we want to approach things with like genuine curiosity and not just be like, so and so is a dumb fascist or whatever. Now, to be clear, there's times where I say stuff like that. I'm a man of contradiction, but I mean, all that to say is like it's really weird to have gotten to that point. And like I had conversations with people. This is where I'm teetering on the edge of what should I say, what shouldn't I? But I was having conversations with people up until recent weeks who were maybe interested in like helping Wisecrack continue to exist. And one conversation I had was with someone who precisely was like, yeah, that's what you guys can do really well, is a certain type of social commentary that feels relatively accessible and isn't like calling everyone that doesn't think exactly what you think like a fascist or something. And so it's
I
been,
think that that's like an essential kernel. And one of the things that I was always so proud of is that the channel just in general went through both in your era and my era went through so many changes. I mean, first of all, a change is not something that most YouTube channels can survive. And we
yeah,
went from a show about literature starring somebody else that plays a character, to then like a animated show with 8-bit graphics and a voiceover, and then an alien show, and then like video essays. Like, we had such a loyal fan base that really kind of got what we were going for. And that thing that you mentioned about, you know, not talking down to people, um, and trying, like, there's really a spirit of teaching to it. A great
yeah,
teacher is somebody who, like, you'll meet people where they're at. You communicate ideas for the sake of really getting them to land with people, rather than show off or something like that. But I think that that's kind of the really essential kernel that was there the whole way. And,
yeah,
like, you have people like Amanda, who's like a complete autodidact, who's able to just like tear through books
yeah, unreal.
and write scripts and like an hour that are amazing, and she's able to just kind of understand the core concept and teach in a really good way. I mean, that's what the team was. The team was an incredible team of teachers. Some of them were actually employed as teachers. Like, shout out to Mia Wood, Nathan Lowe, both of them philosophy teachers
Yeah.
who, taught me so much. I mean, you and Matt Reikley and Austin, I mean, I've said this before, but I was like a glorified student, just was lucky enough to be able to build something that I could surround myself with really, really smart people and really great
Yeah.
teachers that shared my passion for being able to explore cool ideas.
Well, it was nice kind of up until the end. Like some of the last freelancers we actually, I mean, the crazy thing too, when I talk about how we kind of had this era of where things felt like they were like picking up new legs. I mean, we had a writer named Sarah Simon who's doing a PhD in psychiatry, who started writing stuff for us. John Duncan, who's a YouTuber in his own right, PhD in international relations and teaches out in London, started working for us. Tom Wyman, who's a philosopher and working for us. We just had a first script from this guy, Tom Ryan, who has like a theology and psychoanalysis background, who's doing some cool stuff. So like, it was, it was kind of this era. I was like, oh my God, this is so great. Like we have this new sort of generation of people who are like academics who can also speak the language of pop culture. And it's something about what you said before speaks to me in that, like, I think, and again, people know I can get too spicy sometimes, but I think even in some of the videos that veered on like, fuck, we're going to do this because it's kind of clickbaity, or people will be into it, but there's like something to learn from it. Like when we did a video on Hillsdale College. It's like one of the kind of like right-wing libertarian schools, and they have this big online thing. And I kept getting served this ad to take their course on Marxism. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to take it. And I took it, and like I filmed a bunch of it.
Such good content.
And it's one of those things where like, yes, is there stuff in it to make fun of? For sure. But there's a key point in that video where like a thing I emphasize is like, these guys are asking the right questions and they're bringing up really important things. But the thing is then they pivot off in a different direction. And why is it they do that? And I think if someone watches that video, some might watch something like that, or like a video on Jordan Peterson or like James Lindsay, just because they want to dunk on those folks. But I do think like there's an importance for someone walking away being like, it's not just that I walk away from this video being like, that weird, conservative college is stupid or whatever. But it's being like, oh, this is what happens when you don't read books, or this is what can happen when an idea is presented that's out of like the context of scholarship in which it exists. And hopefully someone can walk away being like, oh, it was fun to dunk on a thing a little bit, but the important thing is I actually understand something better. Because I think one of the worst parts about YouTube and stream culture is like, it's way too much about folks dunking on stuff and not enough about folks learning something in that process. And again, I like spice. I like when people can have fun. But like it's almost like people are not taking advantage of opportunities, really easy opportunities to teach people stuff.
It seems like, most of the market of ideas on YouTube is basically the commodity they're selling is smugness and contempt, and we never stoop to that.
Yeah, and I do think now, like the crazy thing is, whenever I talk to people, and it's like it's very humbling. Sometimes if I talk to younger YouTubers who make cool stuff, like recently, I forget how I first talked to her. Maybe it was on like Blue Sky or something. I followed Cheyenne Lynn, a video essayist who I think is so good. I have no idea how old she is, but I assume younger than us. And it was crazy that she like DM'd me to be like, oh, holy crap, like watched Wisecrack for years. And that like inspired me to get into doing this. So I think and I've had other conversations that.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see like the influence and to see that some of the people who I really do think are doing like a good job at the format. If I ever will say that.
Yeah, there was absolutely. And, that's another thing that I think, like, when I think about, actually, one thing I want to mention, like, and it's not just other YouTubers, like, there are some, like, legitimate celebrities that at one point were in the comments section before they were, like, huge celebs. Like, one, Lakeith Stanfield was, like, in the comments on our Get Out video. So he was a big Wisecrack fan, and then he got too big,
Yeah.
Lost contact. But there is a thing where it seems like at some point in YouTube, um, channels that were kind of trailblazers, the rug was pulled out from under them because whatever they started just became a genre. For example, Epic Mealtime.
Mhm.
Epic Mealtime is actually one of the channels that really inspired me to do YouTube stuff. I thought the show was so funny. I thought the idea
So good.
was so crazy good. But then, like, especially on Facebook video, like the idea of like cooking content that made like over the top stuff just became a genre. And then, their numbers went down because there's like a niche version of Epic Mealtime for every single, sub community. And I feel like the same thing, like, I think a real, and now we're kind of getting back into YouTube history a bit. I think a real flashpoint for this was, do you remember in like, I want to say it was like 2015, 2016, there was a big controversy with the Fine Brothers where they tried, the Fine Brothers? You remember the Fine Brothers?
What did they do? What was their thing?
They were the first people to do React videos. They had a show
Oh,
called
yeah, yeah,
React.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So they come up with this thing where they start seeing that other companies, specifically BuzzFeed, are starting to do their own React videos. So they come out with this thing called React World. And they come out with this video and saying, hey, we have really exciting news. We are now going to allow our fans to license the React format that we own, that
Oh
we
boy.
have trademarked. And it was the biggest backlash you could imagine. It was like a huge crap storm. And that was a real flash moment where you realize that you can't own anything on YouTube. We
Mhm.
couldn't own the video essay. I mean, not we ever tried,
Yeah.
but they couldn't own the React video. And like when we start, it was interesting because when we started the video essay, we started like, I guess I just wasn't smart enough to think that, oh, okay, well, we should do like Easter egg content because that's what people want. I was like, no, we're going academic, man. We're going like, big ideas. In a sense, I think that allowed the channel to survive as long as it did because, I think other people kind of looked at like that mountain we climbed and like, oh, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Screw that.
Well, I,
Yeah.
I'm gonna respond to one comment quick, and then I think I want to respond to something you said. So someone in the chat said this, and I'm gonna respond to this because I've seen this posited. So Eli said, "Do you guys think there's a political decision involved in shutting down Wisecrack again to be legal here? Wisecrack's staff was laid off. Wisecrack, the brand entity, is still owned by Enthusiast Gaming, and there's still a YouTube channel that exists that says Wisecrack."
Well, they're
So I'm
going
just,
to, I mean, there are also assets that are continuing to make money,
yes,
including the channel, but also like the Thug Notes book that I co-wrote, if that's still selling, I ain't getting the money, they are.
yeah. So, but I'll say this, and I'll say this because I saw a lot of comments about this, and some people I think trying to like paint our team as freedom fighters, and other people trying to say that we ruined the channel. There was nothing political about the decision, as far as I know, to lay off the team, and I'll tell you why I kind of know that. The people who made the decision, and I don't mean this in a derisive way, had no idea what our content was. The people that ran that company and made decisions, I'm not exaggerating here. I think for most of them, the first Wisecrack video they watched was the final video we put up, which upset them very deeply.
I mean, I also just
So it
think
wasn't political. Like they don't. This is just it's just money shit and business shit.
exactly. That's what I was going to say. Money shit. Like, I mean, until then they were just looking at numbers on a sheet,
Well,
graphs.
and this kind of like weaves into what I was going to say in response to one of your points. Then, I mean, this is the other thing. Then, like the model of corporate entity owning YouTube channels in general does not make sense. And if
Yeah.
you look these, especially if we're going to think about like things broadly in the video essay and edutainment sort of zone or whatever, like look at the people who are doing it well and who are successful. It's people, and it's people that make money off of a mix of AdSense and Patreon, maybe some ads, maybe Nebula or whatever, that have really lean teams that mostly film stuff. I mean, so many really popular video essay channels, people are filming like in their bedrooms with not the
Yeah.
highest quality gear, having people help out here and there. Like that's the stuff that can do well. The idea of companies owning channels that have these huge staffs, unless you're doing stuff that's like really tied into some sort of really easy corporate tie-in or something to get you money. And then too, like in the time, and I know this has changed since you were at Wisecrack, Jared, but like in my time doing stuff on YouTube, there has been a market shift in what brands want to do ads on YouTube videos? How much money can you get for those sorts of things? And it's just not, I mean, I want to say, this is something you could probably correct me on, but I want to say when I first went full time at Wisecrack, there was at least like 7, maybe 8 people that were full time. And I just,
At Wisecrack?
yeah. And I know the money stuff, or at least in recent years, there is no universe that even when Wisecrack is like, has been at its most successful, there's no universe where something like that could make enough money to pay salaries for 5, 6, 7 people.
Well, the company was profitable when it was sold, and at that point, we had a team of 7 at its at its highest, and a lot of that had to do with we had a really. Do you remember? There was a time where, like, twice a month, we had a sponsorship with Wix. We had like tons of Wix ads, and we had this really great, sweet deal with them where they would give us a really nice CPM, and they guaranteed like 2 spots a month for like a year.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that, like, they did it not because the channel was the most popular one in the world. They did it because they really respected our content. And like, that was one of the things that really was like, okay, the choices that I talk about climbing that hill of doing something really academic, like it's not all for naught. But anyway, in terms of like the amount of money that influencers are making for ads, I think it is a little bit lower than it was back in the day.
Yeah.
Also, man, back in the day, like, you not only were you getting more money for an ad, but the ad could be at the very end of the video. Like now it's like, pretty much the brands can, decide whatever, like, oh, it needs to be like in the first like 2 minutes, or it needs to be in the first 30 seconds, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, at the peak, it was at 13. It was not profitable at that time because it was like a growth mode type thing. That's when we hired AJ for Facebook video. We had like an HR person who was there just like, to keep stuff moving. We had a full-time editor. We had, so 13 was the top, 7 when it was sold. But yeah, like, YouTube is big enough to where there are exceptions to all of these. Like, like like Film Theory is now part of a corporation. Philip DeFranco sold his channel a long time ago. There are exceptions that, like, corporate ownership can work, but it's very rare.
Yeah. So in a sense, I do think that, like, while I am sad that the Wisecrack, the current Wisecrack staff was laid off in a way that I think this is fair to say was pretty unceremonious. I'm glad that we went out making stuff that was doing well, and not just that it was doing well, that we went out doing stuff that we were like happy with and felt good about, and working with writers we liked, and we had Alec in there helping us figure stuff out, and just like, that we can feel proud of how the thing in its current iteration or whatever ended. And
you didn't go out with a whimper.
Yeah. And I think, no matter what, we can say that it's dead, it's alive, it might come back. The line of succession is broken. You know what I mean? Like, there was from when you guys started it to a few weeks ago, there was constant overlap. There was like a genetic lineage where the people who were running the channel were there and learned from you and from Alec and from Jacob and worked alongside Ryan and all types of other people. And I think that, like, it would be hard to start a Wisecrack now. And I think it's, no matter what happens, to look at a channel like that what you guys created, that has over a decade of legacy on a platform, that has a really immense catalog, that has inspired so many other channels, and again, like, it was, I was getting messages and emails from people, the week that the layoffs happened, people literally saying like, hey, some of this shit like saved my life. I was like sad and alone and depressed, and watching some of these things and listening to podcasts, and, people being like, Thug Notes helped get me through this, or watching Garrick's was really important to me at this point in my life, or all these sorts of things. Like, there's so much content and stuff that gets made that I do think is made pretty cynically for the purpose of making people money. And I think that to have been a part of the thing that you guys started, and to have affected people in such positive ways, it like feels good, and no one can like take that away from us. And I do think, there was, some people are aware of this. I'll talk more about this when a little more smoke clears, guys. I'll talk a little bit more about
Yeah.
this, but
Well, I mean,
oh,
if
go
I
ahead.
haven't explicitly said
Oh,
it before, I mean, thank you for carrying the torch as well as you did, man.
yeah.
I'm really very proud of the whole legacy.
Mhm. No, it's inspiring to be a part of, and like I will just say that the thing that I think was missed is like, I've said this, so I'm comfortable saying this publicly. Um, the people that own Wisecrack's parent company were not pleased that we made a final video. They were not pleased that I let people on the Patreon know that like we were all leaving the channel so that content would not get made. And the reason why I'll only speak for myself that I wanted to do that is like the audience, the channel like is the audience, the channel is the community, and it would have felt really shitty to not have a moment of finality with that community. It would have felt shitty to have those people feel like they were sold a false bill of goods or whatever. And I do think one thing that I learned in the layoff experience is that like, some of the strongest channels and stream communities and stuff like that, they are communities that involve people. And when you lose sight of that, a thing, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Yeah, I'll say this in more positive and not negative terms. The fact that the channel always was and felt like a community is, I think, the thing that meant a lot to a lot of us. And I think that still means a lot now, is like people from that community, check in with stuff that Lux is doing and watch videos Alec is putting out and have like, helped me get a channel going and stuff like that. Like, it just shows that those people feel connected to the people that have worked on the channel for so long. There's a reason why, when you started making stuff, Jared, people got so friggin' psyched, because for a huge chunk of people, they were like, my internet daddy, my best redheaded internet friend is gone. Now I have him back. And I think there's a lot of channels, there's a lot of other things that like, if they died or if they went away, it would be like, oh, the brand is gone, but who cares? But I think what all of this shows is that, the people in the community continue to matter even once a channel stops posting videos.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And
Um,
I think, you made it a tighter community than I ever could. I mean, again, like as we've discussed, I'm less excited to be public facing than some other elements when it comes to content creation. We did have, streaming podcasts and stuff like that,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, again, the thing about the community that really spoke to me again was the fact that they stayed with us through so many right turns or left turns that the company needed to make. And I think that was a testament to the fact that people really understood what we were trying to do.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'll let you go. I know it's getting late where you are. You've been here for 2 hours. Really appreciate it. So what is your relationship now to making stuff on YouTube? Because I've looking, and I think I've watched most things that you've put
Oh,
up,
that's
but
kind of you.
I have no life. But I feel like, you did some more casual stuff at one point, and I feel like recently in the past like year or so, and sorry if I get this wrong, it feels like you've really come into a format that to me feels like just the most like platonic version of Jared Bauer content, which is videos about movies and looking back on them and trying to re-understand them or understand them anew. And a lot of those friggin' videos have like done really, 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 really well, and kind of feel like, and I know for a lot of people, it like scratches an itch they feel like hasn't been scratched for a while. So what like led you to that, and what's your relationship to making stuff these days?
I guess, when I left Wisecrack, I had a very, very big change in my life because I had gotten so sick. I moved across the world. I had to kind
Mm,
of get away from myself
yeah.
in the most significant way possible. And then over the last couple of years, I've done a lot of healing,
Mhm.
and I'm like in love with this movie theater that I go to all the time, and I really recaptured my love for movies.
Oh,
And I've kind
amazing.
of come to realize that some shit went down at the company, things got bad, but as much as I still am that person, that's me, a
Mhm.
guy who loves movies and loves ideas. And I've kind of gotten a little bit more comfortable in that. in terms of my relationship, I think the way to describe my new content is that I've kind of come to realize that the artistic process really is like digging a hole, in the sense that, like, back in the day when I said we're always hunting for angles, I had to watch it and I had to pretty much evaluate whether or not there was an angle. But that's not how I do it these days. These days, I fucking dig. I watch a movie, and if I don't know, I don't know what the angle is after it's done. I don't know what the angle is after I went to sleep. I might not even know what the angle is after I've been writing for 3 days. But through that struggle, I feel like I kind of know what it means more to be a creator now, realizing that, like, creators don't just come up with something in their head. They just like try, fail, revise until something starts to take shape. And that discipline for me of just like digging that hole of creativity and just seeing what's underneath. And sometimes what's underneath is great. Sometimes you're really proud of it. Sometimes it's just like, all right, well, that's what I found. Got to put it out there. But for me, that discipline of digging and being confident in the fact that you're going to make something, because there was a long time, Michael, where, I had relied on Alec and Amanda and like all these writers that we had hired. There were very few pieces of content that I was writing myself in those last days of Wisecrack, and I started to lose my confidence that I could even do it anymore. And so in a lot of ways, it's been that. It's been kind of finding my own ability as a creator again.
And do you feel like, is there a sense of freedom, and maybe, I don't know if calm's the right word, but something
Oh,
that comes
definitely.
from
It's
the,
not
yeah.
like, if a video does poorly, it's like, all right, well,
Well, because also that's
like,
not what your ability to pay your rent depends on, right? You are
yeah,
working. So,
right,
yeah.
right. I have a day job, which is such a blessing in the sense that it has nothing to do with content creation. And so, like, if things go bad, I like have something else to focus on, and it's a godsend.
Yeah. That's amazing. And yeah, and again, I think it's cool. It's cool to see you. And I think it's a thing too, where like I remember there was a point where like, I forget, there's a point where like I hadn't seen your stuff for a while. Maybe I wasn't like looking at YouTube as much, and something popped up. And I remember watching it and even just like feeling, probably projecting, being like, oh, he seems happy, seems locked in, seems like he's just like, it was like, it's like old Jared, old Jared with maybe some more gray hairs in the beard or something. But, which I think is cool. And I think people really appreciate.
Well, I appreciate, yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, we can wind down. It's been a very long time.
Yeah, it's 10 p.m. I have to be at work in the morning.
Oh my God. Well, thank
Yeah,
you so much
yeah.
for doing this.
No. I really
Let's,
appreciate you inviting me on, man. I feel like it's been long overdue. It's been really a pleasure to go down memory lane. Honestly, I was a little bit. I was like, oh man, do I really want to dig up some of these old memories? But you were great,
well, thank you
and
for doing it.
it was really good.
Oh, okay. Well, let's do some other stuff again soon then.
Yeah.
'Cause that'd be
I
fun.
would love to let's think of some. I mean, we got plenty of stuff to talk about, I'm sure.
Awesome. I'll stick around for a sec chat, and maybe I can answer any questions anyone has. But if not, we're going to say bye to Jared now. Jared, thank you so much. Please do say thank you to Jared in the chat. Sub to his channel if you don't. Have a great night in Finland, buddy.
All right, thanks, Michael. Talk to you soon, buddy. Peace.
Hey. Okay, guys, that was obviously your friend and mine, Jared Bauer, the founder of Wisecrack. Thank you so much for hanging out, guys. And thank you for those who want to like the stream multiple times. And I do think I had some people reach out kind of asking something to the effect of like, oh, are you gonna talk about stuff? Are you gonna get spicy? You're gonna talk about the thing? Just for those of you who are still here, I feel like any cops wouldn't watch that deeply into it. I'm planning on making something just about my experience and sort of what happened at the end of Wisecrack. Partially is a cathartic thing of getting it out there, partially because I do still feel like the audience deserves it, you know? I don't know if you guys feel like that. I kind of feel like I want you to have that sense of things. So and just a thing as well. This is the first week. I'm definitely doing a regular stream schedule. In general, I'm going to do Monday mornings and Wednesday afternoons. This Wednesday, Todd McGowan's coming on. Now, Todd McGowan is a professor at the University of Vermont. He's the host of the Why Theory podcast. He's written a ton of good books. One of my favorite American philosophers, writers, and stuff like that. So Todd's going to be here Wednesday. I'm very excited. We are going to do morning Wednesday because that worked better for his schedule. Next week, CJ is coming on. CJ the X, one of my favorite YouTubers in the world. So CJ will be on soon. I'm trying to get more of a schedule booked out here. So please do hit me up if there's folks you want me to talk to. There's some other people I've reached out to as well. So I'm trying to get a schedule going there. Thanks if you checked out the video on Jordan Peterson on Friday, filming and getting a video finished today on depression. And then I decided the next thing I'm going to do is going to be something on Marxism and postmodernism. Shocking, right? Shocking that I would do something like that. So thank you for all your support. Thank you. I do want to say thank you very in particular to all the patrons, the dogs, the big dogs and the biggest dogs. I really appreciate you. If you are interested at all in not paying money on patron is what I just said. Patreon, but just knowing when shit happens. If you sign up for the free one, I post every time I have a video and every time I stream. That might sound annoying to you, but I think it's nice because then you're not dependent on the algorithm to know when stuff is happening. So I will simply say, if you're not already doing it, consider just doing the free Patreon thing there. I have it in the chat as well, have it in the description and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. If there's any questions people have, I'm happy to rip through some real quick. Let me do one thing. Typing a thing. And especially thank you to everyone who encouraged me in wrapping Snow's Informer in the last thing. Critical realism video, someone brought that up. It Could Happen Here was fun to do. Yeah, Mav, please come on. And I'm not on Discord as much anymore. I'll try again, but maybe email me or something like that. I think you have my email or I have access to it. FT Signifier. I'm working on. I've been chatting with FD just over DMs because I wanted to have a conversation with him in general. So maybe he'll want to talk sometimes. Zamir says, is there anything you couldn't cover at Wisecrack you're interested to explore on your own channel? Yes. I want to get more into some of the, I would say like nitty gritty philosophy stuff to get a little more academic. I think with Wisecrack, we're a company, there's all these people, we had to worry about views. I'm trying to put myself in a position where Patreon's doing well enough and I have a couple of ads a month so that I can make stuff that's just for like the dogs, right? You know what I mean? Like I want to be able to make stuff where I'm like, I don't care if it gets 40,000 views, if it's something that I think is really cool and exciting. And also I like talking about religion a little bit more. So I'll probably talk about religion stuff. Don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into a channel where I try to convert you into evangelical Christians. I just think religion's playing an important part in American political life, and it's worth talking about. Listen, I would always do a Hassan collab, but dude, he's too famous, man. RM Brown, I like RM Brown's channel so much that I'm like afraid to reach out to see if he would ever want to come on. What if he says no? What if he says no? What does he mean about it? What if he says I can't be in the muscular class? It would hurt too much. But I will see. But please do let me know. I'm just seeing. I'm not going to blow up. The goal is not to blow up, guys. The goal to be 100% is to just make enough money doing a version of this that I can do it exactly the way that I wanted to. Lil Bill's so sick. Another person I'd be intimidated to reach out to because I think he's there. Brandon, I don't know if there's a custom way. I can look into it, but also just don't worry about it. Thank you for being here so much. You don't have to give me money. Just be here. I definitely dream of moving to another country, maybe Scandinavian. VoxX, you can email me maybe if you want to do that. Who's HCR? Someone said, can you get beer patio? HCR. Obviously, Henry needs to come back on stream soon. I was going to maybe hit Henry up about next week. Favorite Grateful Dead year, probably like 71 or 73. JGB, late 70s, I think would be maybe think Dr. Lori Johnson. I'll look into that. I'm just kind of catching up on the chat. I should go because I got to make some stuff. Someone said, does watching the ads help you? It's not the end of the world. Don't watch the ads. I would say this sounds weird. Skip the YouTube ads if you want, but if it's like a sponsor, check it out. If there's ever a sponsor ad that you think is genuinely like interesting, sign up with my code because it helps. And I'm trying to only do stuff that you guys would ideally fuck with. Yeah, Eddie says so many middle-aged dads are going through life-changing careers. I really like what Wizworld said. Getting merely medium is a new goal for any smart artist. Yeah, like I just want to be a middle-class creative person. Like that's it. You know what I mean? I want to be yeah, people. Dan McClellan seems cool. Maybe I'll reach out to that dude. No, please don't. If LeDon James, that would be if LeDron James was here, that would be a really big. That'd be a big prank. Alice, I'm gonna try to get Alice back on. I haven't talked to Alice in a bit, but you guys know I love Alice. Yeah, and if you guys have other recommendations, hit me up on social, all that sort of stuff. Animated Human said this thing, which I think is really take a small break. Aren't you burned out? Yeah, I am. So I have a couple video things, and then I'm going to kind of slow down on video stuff for a bit. And I had a really helpful talk in. Shout out to Jared Henderson. I mean, maybe this is weird to say that we talked. Maybe he doesn't want people to know that he talks to me. Maybe he doesn't want to be associated with bald people. He has great hair too. Probably doesn't want to be associated with a bald guy. Oh shit, never mind. But I got some good advice from him about not overdoing it. Hugo Pinnick, am I saying it wrong? You Gopnik? I have talked to him. So we'll see. Cubs aren't going to win the World Series. They're going to win the division. And yeah, and again, and check out Techno Poverty Night, guys, please. Oh, Heather Cox Richardson. Please do watch Techno Poverty, guys. If you have other thoughts on who I should have on or other stuff, you can hit me up on socials. I'm trying to be on Twitter less because I said fascism was bad over the weekend, and someone went in my DMs and said they were going to kill my family. So Blue Sky, hit me up there. My email address is in the thing. If you're on Patreon, you can message me there. There's chats on the Patreon too, so you can throw ideas in the chat where we can all talk. But thank you guys so much. And just know that like the reason I wanted to talk to Jared and the reason I thought this was important to do is just kind of like get at this idea that the wisecrack thing was really important. And I learned a lot. And I loved a lot. And I laughed a little bit. And I want to keep doing a version of this. But the reason I want to keep doing this is because of the community and you all. That's what I want to do. I don't want to blow up. I don't want to be some channel that's like, this creator hacked the algorithm to do blah, 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 blah. I want to make stuff that I like a lot for a community I like a lot and just make enough money to like live my normal life. That's all I want. That's all I want. You guys have a really great day. Thank you so much. If you're watching this after the fact, leave comments because one of my toxic traits is I read the comments and I respond to the comments. It's my number one toxic content creator trait. So you can always hit me up that way. Thank you so much, guys. I'm not going to say I love you because someone told me in a comment that when a creator says that they love them, it makes them feel like they're being taken advantage of for money. So I don't love you, but I like you a lot and I would maybe do.